The Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. King Solomon, as the legend goes, once set an advisor on a quest for a magic ring. The powers of this ring were such that it was told when a happy person looked upon it, they became sad. And when a sad person looked upon it, they became happy. Well, Solomon's trusted advisor, Benaniah, had no idea where to go to look for this ring. On walking through a poor part of Jerusalem, Benaniah passed by a merchant and decided to ask him if he had heard of this ring that made the sad happy and the happy sad. Well, the elderly merchant smiled a sly smile and then took a plain gold ring out of his pocket, and then he proceeded to engrave something on it. When Benaniah read the inscription, he was pretty sure that he had found what he was looking for. On returning from his quest, Benaniah met with an eager King Solomon. "Well, my trusted friend, have you found what I've been looking for?" Well, Benaniah took the small gold ring from his pocket and placed it into the king's hand. The moment the king read the engraving, the smile disappeared from his face. For the merchant had etched these words into that ring: "This too shall pass." And in that very moment, King Solomon realized that all of his exceptional wealth and tremendous power were but fleeting things, and one day they'd all be gone. People who work closely with hospice patients often notice how people experience an opening and widening up of their lives as death approaches. For there are new beginnings in our endings. Abraham Lincoln, in the darkest days of the Civil War, reminded himself over and over again that this too shall pass. It kept him going as he led a very fractured United States through the throes of war and toward reconstructing some new beginnings. When the disciples marvel at that grand architecture of the temple, Jesus' response, in effect, is that this too shall pass. Jesus' disciples show how easily we all become awed by the wonders of our innovations. Through the systemic power of a temple system, a rather impressive structure had been built. "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." "Look, teacher, the technological innovations in our day are even more amazing, as satellites orbit the planet, relaying back communications and other data." And have you ever seen the skyscrapers in our cities? They may look, that temple looks small. And also our amazing engineering feats of dams and bridges. Plus, we've established an electronic network that connects billions of people. See what large and wonderful things we've done? We're a lot like Jesus' disciples. I recall my very first call to ministry as an associate pastor of Holy Cross Lutheran Church. They had just recently completed a wonderful building project, including a new state-of-the-art sanctuary with a spectacular stained glass cross for the Holy Cross window as its centerpiece. And then plus their previous worship space had been converted into a very functional fellowship hall. Well, Jesus' predictions about the temple now ring true for that congregation. Not one stone still stands. Holy Cross congregation and that church building no longer exist. In its place on the corner of two main thoroughfares in Sarasota, Florida, sits a Walmart marketplace. I know it's difficult to imagine, but the same fate will come to this building one day as well. Likewise, all our satellites will eventually fall from the sky, and even our seemingly eternal skyscrapers will someday meet a demolition crew. I hear in Jesus' warnings here a caution to focus on what's most important in life, which isn't those things that advertisers and popular culture point us towards. The life that Jesus teaches and encourages is one not built on fame and fortune, on outward appearance and material goods. It's built on loving one another as God first loved us. Yes, Jesus' way of life actually appears foolish to the ways of our world. It's the way of the cross, of love and forgiveness, not glory and power. This Jesus way of life also recognizes how many of our world's most impressive structures have been built on the shoulders of the poor and the oppressed. For example, how many homes in poor areas of the city have been destroyed by the need for a new or wider highway or upgraded housing for the upper middle class? Many scientists today warn us of rising seas and devastating storms, fires, and drought if we don't make some rather swift changes and curb our burning of fossil fuels. And those who have done the least to cause climatic change will be some of the first to suffer the consequences. God's ways of justice that we seek to follow include our caring for creation and working for justice, which often calls for a reversal of the way the world normally operates. As we near the end of our church year, the themes from our lessons we had them today, they focus on the end times, when God's reconciliation of the world will come to completion and all creation will live together in peace and harmony. This 13th chapter of Mark's Gospel is often referred to as a little apocalypse. Now, apocalyptic literature wasn't written as judgment to decide who's in and who's out, though it's sometimes applied that way. It was intended rather as a beacon of hope for those on the edge of despair. It spoke more to what was happening then when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD than about what's to happen in some unforeseen future. Today it speaks the truth of suffering in our world and then points us beyond it. It speaks to everyone experiencing persecution and disruption in life that God will prevail in the end. It says, in effect, this too shall pass. It acknowledges that there will be conflict. The ground beneath our feet will move. This, Jesus says, is but the beginning of the birth pangs. God will bring something new out of all our conflict and turmoil. Yes, this is just but the beginning of something new being born. Something new can be born out of our turmoil and conflict. The 20th century was probably the bloodiest century yet, and it's kind of continued somewhat into the 21st century, with 2 world wars back then claiming many millions of lives. And for more than 75 years, the threat of nuclear annihilation has been a possible reality that we live with. And the current polarized political climate, not only in our own country, but between nations of the world, must also be acknowledged. There continue to be wars and rumors of wars. But rather than becoming alarmed, we can see in this metaphor that the world just might be in labor. What's the new thing ready to be born? I remember learning once about an astronaut who had a kind of mystical experience on his first trip to space as he looked out the window and saw that beautiful blue Earth way below him. I can't remember who the astronaut was, but I do remember his insight. He saw how, as he looked down, there were no visible borders between countries like the ones that we put on our maps. He sensed the next evolutionary step for our global community was to live together in harmony as one people on one planet. Now that would be a new birth. In line with Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of God's beloved community that transcends racism and all our other isms as well. Amid the tensions in our world and the tensions in our lives, can we trust today that something new can and will be born from those tensions? As many women undoubtedly know, once the contractions start, there's no turning back. So how might we serve as midwives to whatever new reality God is birthing in our world today? I turn to our passage from Hebrews as a little guidebook. For as midwives, we must practice hope, or as we sang about in our psalm, have that hope being part of our bodies. Hebrews puts it this way: let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see that day approaching. Now, how often have you heard that word provoke paired with love? I usually think of provoke in connection with conflict. Someone was provoked to retaliate. But here we're encouraged to provoke one another to love and good deeds. Could our role as midwives this day be to help one another hold on to our hope and not be led astray? As stewards of hope, we trust that God is already at work, birthing something new in and through us. We're forever being shaped as a community that practices forgiveness and reconciliation, a community where broken lives find healing and experience the joy of new birth. We're called to be and ever become a place where the lost are found, the aimless find meaning and purpose, and where all find welcome, healing, and affirmation. Jesus speaks about the end times on the way to his own end and new beginning. He reminds us that this too shall pass. Everything is transitory. Our seemingly eternal structures will not last. Every stone will be thrown down, and our lives too are transitory. We are going to die. And keeping that truth in mind makes a difference in how we live each and every day, not in despair, but with hope. For God calls us into ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. God grants us faith to go forth with courage and hope, not knowing where we'll go, but trusting that God's hand is leading us and God's love supporting us. So let's head into this future to discover together what new thing is ready to be born. Amen.